The conference hall of the Galactic Council stood silent as Grand Chancellor Varine stared at the star map before him. Red markers covered nearly a third of the display, each one representing a world consumed by the Void Swarm. 300 billion souls, gone in less than a solar cycle. "We are losing," Vorin said, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. "Every weapon, every strategy, every defense we've employed has failed. The swarm adapts faster than we can innovate." Around the circular table, representatives from the Empire's most powerful species sat in various states of despair. The Kryn, masters of gravitational warfare, had watched their homeworld crushed into a singularity. The Taloxians, whose particle beams could slice through planetary cores, had seen their entire armada absorbed and repurposed by the enemy. Even the ancient Vorkai, who had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years before the Empire's formation, had nothing left to offer. "There is one option," said a small voice from the back of the chamber. All eyes turned to Ambassador Zareth, a junior diplomat from a minor world. She was young by galactic standards, barely 2 centuries old, and her suggestion that she had something to contribute bordered on insulting, given the gravity of the situation. "Speak quickly," Vorin said, his patience worn thin by months of defeats. Zareth activated her personal datapad, and a new image appeared on the main display. A blue and green world, the third planet from a yellow star in an unremarkable arm of the galaxy. "Earth," she said simply. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and angry hisses. Several delegates stood immediately, their faces showing expressions that ranged from confusion to outright horror. "You cannot be serious," snarled General Krath, his scales bristling with agitation. "That world is forbidden. It has been marked as prohibited for 50,000 years. The automated defense protocols alone would destroy any fleet we send." "I am aware of the restrictions," Zareth replied calmly. "I am also aware that we are about to become extinct. The prohibition protocols include an exception clause for extinction-level events. This qualifies." Vorin studied the young ambassador with newfound interest. She was either brilliantly brave or fatally stupid. "The records regarding Earth are classified at the highest levels. How do you even know about the exception clause?" "My family served as archivist for the old council," Zareth said. "Before the records were sealed, my ancestor made copies. I have studied them my entire life." "Then you know why Earth is forbidden," Vorin said quietly. "You know what they were, what they did. I know what the records say. I also know that was 50,000 years ago. Perhaps they have changed. Perhaps they have forgotten. Or perhaps," she paused, meeting the Grand Chancellor's gaze directly, "perhaps they are exactly what we need right now." The vote was close. Many council members refused to participate at all, citing ancient oaths never to disturb the sleeping world. Others argued that awakening Earth would be trading one extinction for another. But in the end, the mathematics of survival won out. The Void Swarm would reach the core worlds within 6 months. Earth might destroy them, but the swarm certainly would. Zareth's ship, the diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system 3 days later. Immediately, her sensors went wild with warnings. "Ambassador, I'm detecting over 3,000 weapons platforms activating across the system," her pilot reported, his voice tight with fear. "Energy signatures are—" "They're not possible. These readings are higher than our planetary defense grid's entire output. Broadcast our diplomatic credentials on all frequencies," Zareth ordered, forcing her voice to remain steady, "and transmit the Council's authorization codes for the prohibition exception." For 10 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the weapons platforms went silent, returning to standby mode. "We've been cleared for approach to the third planet," the pilot said, relief evident in his tone. "Though I'm picking up something strange about their moon." "Strange how?" "It's too perfect. The orbital mechanics, the mass distribution, even the crater patterns. It's like someone designed it." He paused, checking his instruments again. "Ambassador, I think their moon is artificial." Zareth felt her blood run cold. If the moon was a construct, what else had humanity hidden in plain sight? As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, Zareth was struck by how peaceful everything appeared. Cities sprawled across the continents, connected by networks of roads and rails. Aircraft moved through the skies following orderly patterns. There were no orbital defense platforms, no military installations bristling with weapons. No signs of a unified war machine. They landed at a facility the humans called the United Nations headquarters, in a city named New York. Zareth had expected a military reception, armed guards, perhaps even hostility. Instead, she found politicians in formal clothing and journalists with cameras. A human woman approached, her hair silver with age, her posture dignified. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador. I am Secretary General Amina Okonkwo. We've been expecting someone to come eventually." "Expecting us?" Zareth asked, surprised. "We've watched your empire expand across the galaxy for millennia," Okonkwo said with a slight smile. "We have very good telescopes. When we detected the swarm's approach 6 months ago, we calculated the probability of contact at 97%. Come, we have much to discuss." The meeting chamber was simple compared to the grand halls of the Galactic Council, but it was filled with representatives from nations across the human world. Zareth stood before them and delivered her message as clearly as she could. "The Galactic Empire is dying," she said. "An enemy from beyond our galaxy has invaded, and we cannot stop them. They consume everything, learn from everything, adapt to everything. We have lost 300 billion citizens in the past year alone. At current projections, the Empire will fall completely within 6 months." She paused, studying the human faces before her. Some showed concern. Others remained carefully neutral, but none showed surprise. "We come to you because our records indicate that humanity once possessed technology and capabilities far beyond what we currently employ. We need your help. We need your weapons, your ships, your knowledge. In return, we offer membership in the Galactic Council and full access to our own technologies." A long silence followed her words. Then a man with dark skin and kind eyes stood. He wore the uniform of what Zareth's translator identified as the United States military. "General Marcus Webb," he introduced himself. "Before we answer, Ambassador, we need to ask you some questions. Your empire has watched us for 50,000 years, never making contact, never interfering. Why?" Zareth hesitated. The truth was classified, forbidden knowledge that could shatter civilizations. But they had come here seeking help from humanity. They deserved honesty. "Because you terrified us," she said simply. "Because the last time humanity traveled the stars, you conquered half the galaxy in a single generation. Because when you fought among yourselves, you cracked planets and extinguished suns. Because you had the power to reshape reality itself, and you used it without mercy or restraint." The humans exchanged glances, some confused, others thoughtful. "And you believe we still have this power?" Okonkwo asked. "Your moon is artificial," Zareth said. "Our sensors detected it immediately. You have defense systems hidden throughout your solar system that make our most advanced weapons look like children's toys. And yet you live here, on one world, pretending to be a simple species taking your first steps into space." "Yes, Secretary General, I believe you still have that power." Okonkwo stood and walked to a window overlooking the city. "We need time to discuss this among ourselves. Can you give us 48 hours? "Of course," Zareth said, though every instinct screamed that they didn't have time to spare. As the humans filed out of the chamber, Zareth noticed one woman remaining behind. She was elderly, perhaps 90 years old, with white hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of ages. "They don't remember, you know," the woman said softly. "Most of them have no idea what you're talking about." "We made sure of that." "Who are you?" Zareth asked. "Dr. Sarah Chen. My family has been the keepers for 2,000 generations. We remember what the rest have forgotten." She smiled sadly. "Your empire was wise to fear us, Ambassador. But you were also wise to come. Sometimes the only thing that can stop a monster is another monster. We'll have your answer in 48 hours. She left Zareth alone in the chamber, staring up at the artificial moon hanging in Earth's sky and wondering what exactly they had just awakened. Dr. Sarah Chen's apartment was modest, filled with books and photographs spanning generations. Zareth sat across from her, a cup of something the humans called tea cooling in her hands. "You said your family remembers," Zareth prompted. "Tell me what really happened." Sarah stood and retrieved an ancient-looking box from a cabinet. Inside was a data crystal, its surface etched with patterns that made Zareth's eyes hurt to look at directly. 53,000 years ago. "Humanity reached the stars," Sarah began, her voice taking on the rhythm of a story told countless times. "We were young, aggressive, curious. We encountered other species, and at first we tried to coexist. But humans have always been problem solvers, and we saw problems everywhere. She activated the crystal, and holographic images filled the room. Zareth saw human ships, but not like the primitive vessels currently orbiting Earth. These were elegant and terrible, moving through space like predators through water. We developed technology faster than anyone else, Sarah continued. Neural interfacing, quantum manipulation, biological engineering, dimensional folding. Within 500 years, we controlled 4,000 worlds. Within 1,000, we had no equals. The images shifted, showing vast battles across star systems. Human ships deployed weapons that bent gravity, stopped time, unraveled matter at the molecular level. Entire enemy fleets simply ceased to exist. We weren't conquerors in the traditional sense, Sarah said. We didn't want slaves or tribute. We wanted progress, efficiency, order. So we rewrote the brains of those who resisted. We adjusted their neural patterns to make them cooperative, productive, happy even. We called it liberation. Zareth felt sick. You turned them into puppets. We turned them into better versions of themselves, Sarah corrected, her voice hard. Or so we told ourselves. We eliminated war, poverty, disease, suffering. We created a perfect society spanning 20,000 worlds. And then some of us started to ask if we had the right to do that. The hologram showed 2 human fleets facing each other across empty space. The Civil War lasted 3 centuries, Sarah said softly. Those who wanted to continue perfecting the galaxy against those who believed we had gone too far. We developed weapons specifically to fight ourselves, weapons that could overcome our own defenses, bypass our own technology. We didn't fight over resources or territory. We fought over philosophy, over the very definition of what it meant to be human. The images showed stars going dark, planets cracking open, space itself seeming to tear and bleed. By the end, 40,000 worlds were dead or dying. The human population had dropped from 9 trillion to less than 1 billion. And we realized that we had become the very thing we initially set out to eliminate. We had become chaos, destruction, death. The hologram faded. Sarah looked very old in the sudden darkness. The survivors made a choice, she said. We would end the cycle. We gathered everyone who remained and brought them here, to Earth. We shut down the shipyard, sealed the weapons, put the defense systems on automatic. And then we erased ourselves. Erased? Zareth asked. Genetically reset, Sarah explained. We used our biological engineering on ourselves, shortened our lifespans, reduced our natural aggression, limited our cognitive capacity for warfare. We made ourselves smaller, weaker, more focused on cooperation than domination. Then we destroyed all records of what we had been, except for one family line who would remember, who would keep the knowledge safe until it was needed again. She looked directly at Zareth. My family has carried this burden for 2,000 generations. We've watched humanity rebuild from scratch, develop civilization again, reach for the stars again, this time slower, more careful, more human. And we've waited for the day someone would come asking for the old humans to wake up. Can you do it? Zareth asked. Can you reverse what was done? The genetic changes aren't reversible, Sarah said. But the technology is still there waiting. The ships, the weapons, the systems, they were built to last forever, and they've been maintained by automated systems all this time. Modern humans can use them, though it won't be easy. The real question is whether we should. Over the next 48 hours, something extraordinary happened across Earth. Sarah Chen appeared before the United Nations General Assembly and told them everything. The initial reaction was disbelief, then anger at the deception, then fear of what the truth meant. But humans were problem solvers, and the Void Swarm was a problem. Research teams were dispatched to locations Sarah provided. Off the coast of Japan, they found a sealed facility 3 miles beneath the ocean floor. Inside were ships, thousands of them, perfectly preserved and waiting. In Antarctica, beneath 2 miles of ice, they discovered an AI complex still running, still monitoring, still ready for orders after 50,000 years of silence. On the moon, the artificial moon, a team of astronauts entered through a hidden access port and found themselves inside a hollow superstructure. The entire satellite was a weapon system, built to destroy threats to Earth from beyond the solar system. Its power core was still active, humming with barely contained energy. The news spread across Earth's networks. Governments debated, scientists verified, historians wept at the lost chapters of human history. But in the end, the decision came down to a simple vote in the UN General Assembly. Secretary General Okonkwo addressed the Assembly and the world. We face a choice that our ancestors faced 53,000 years ago. We can have power or we can have peace. But this time we don't have the luxury of choosing peace. The Void Swarm will not stop at our borders. If the galaxy falls, Earth falls with it. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would wake up the sleeping giant. Zareth watched from orbit as the transformation began. The first sign was Mars. The red planet's surface began to shift, massive plates retracting to reveal structures beneath. Within hours, what had appeared to be a dead world became a sprawling shipyard, lights activating in geometric patterns across the entire surface. Then Jupiter, the great red spot, a storm that had raged for centuries, suddenly stabilized. It pulsed once, twice, and then tore open, revealing not clouds but a swirling portal, a gateway to somewhere else. Ships began emerging from it. Old human vessels that had been stored in dimensional pockets, away from the decay of normal space. The asteroid belt stopped its random drift and began organizing itself into a grid pattern. Each asteroid, Zareth's sensors revealed, was actually an automated defense platform, now activating and linking together into a network that surrounded the inner solar system. But it was Earth's oceans that provided the greatest shock. Along every coastline, the water began to bubble and churn. Then they rose, massive shapes breaking through the surface. Ships, but not ships. These were organic mechanical hybrids grown as much as built, their hulls covered in something that looked like skin, but read on sensors as advanced composite armor. How many? General Krath asked, his voice transmitted from the council chambers light years away, watching through Zareth's ship feeds. Zareth checked her sensors, then checked them again, certain there must be an error. Initial count shows 50,000 vessels. But more are emerging. General, they stored an entire invasion fleet under their oceans. Invasion fleet? Krath repeated. What else would you call it? Zareth said. These ships weren't built for defense. They were built to project power across the galaxy. Back on Earth, volunteers were being selected for training. General Marcus Webb was among the first to enter a neural interface chamber. He lay down on a platform that adjusted itself to his body shape, and technicians attached nodes to his temples. Beginning synchronization, a technician announced. General, you may experience some disorientation. The interface activated and Marcus screamed. Not in pain, but in recognition, memories flooded through him. Memories that weren't his, but were human. He remembered piloting a dreadnought through the heart of a star. He remembered conquering worlds with a thought. He remembered the Civil War, the death, the horror of what humanity had become. And he remembered the choice to forget, to become small, to become safe. I remember, he whispered as the synchronization completed. We all remember now. It's in our genes, buried but not gone. Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck. She had kept the secret for so long, protecting humanity from itself. Now the protection was being removed, and she could only hope that modern humans, shaped by 50,000 years of learning to be gentle, could control the power of their ancestors. Zareth returned to Earth and met with Secretary General Okonkwo one final time before humanity's forces departed. We'll help you, Okonkwo said. But understand this, Ambassador. We remember now what we were and we remember why we stopped. We'll fight your war, but the galaxy must agree to one condition. Name it, Zareth said. Humanity will never be controlled, ruled, or governed by the Empire. We'll be allies, but never subjects. And if any species attempts to take advantage of our emergence to attack or exploit other worlds, we'll remember that we know how to deal with aggressors. Zareth thought of the weapons she'd seen activated, the ships emerging from hiding, the defense systems that had been watching the galaxy for 50 millennia. The Council will agree to your terms, she said quietly. Good, Okonkwo said. Then let's go save your empire. The integration of human forces into the Empire's military structure was more complicated than anyone anticipated. General Krath stood in the command center of the Imperial flagship Eternal Vigilance, watching as human vessels took up positions throughout the fleet. Their formation makes no sense, his tactical officer reported. They're not following any standard defensive pattern. Half their ships are positioned where they'll have no mutual fire support. Perhaps they know something we don't, Krath muttered, though privately he doubted it. The humans had been isolated for 50,000 years. Warfare had evolved significantly since then. A communication request came through from one of the human vessels. Krath accepted it, and the image of General Marcus Webb appeared on the screen. The human looked different than he had a week ago. His eyes had a strange quality now, as if he was seeing more than what was physically present. "General Krath," Marcus said with a nod of respect. "My ship is fully synchronized and ready for deployment. We'd like to run a joint training exercise with your fleet before we engage the swarm." "An excellent idea," Krath agreed. "We've prepared a simulation that mirrors the swarm's typical attack patterns. It should give your forces a good understanding of what we're facing." The exercise began an hour later. Krath's fleet took up their practiced defensive formation, layers of shields and overlapping fire zones designed to wear down attacking forces through attrition. The human ships scattered across the battlefield in what looked like complete chaos. The simulated swarm attacked with its usual efficiency, waves of bioships that adapted to each weapon system within seconds of exposure. Krath's fleet fell back in good order, rotating damaged ships to the rear while fresh vessels moved forward. It was textbook defensive warfare, designed to survive rather than win. Then the human ships engaged, and Krath understood that everything he knew about warfare was about to become obsolete. The human vessels didn't try to maintain formation or establish fire zones. They moved like living things, each ship acting independently but somehow coordinating with perfect precision. They dove into the swarm's formations, fired weapons that Krath's sensors couldn't even classify, then broke away before the enemy could adapt. One human ship accelerated directly into a cluster of swarm vessels and detonated itself. But instead of a normal explosion, the blast created a sphere of frozen time. The swarm ships caught in the radius simply stopped, hanging motionless in space while human weapons tore them apart. Another human vessel fired something that looked like a beam of light, but behaved like a living thing. It wove through the swarm formation, and everywhere it touched, enemy ships began attacking each other, their neural networks rewritten to see their own kind as threats. "What are they doing?" Krath's tactical officer asked, his voice shaking. "Winning," Krath said softly. The simulation ended with the swarm force completely destroyed. Krath's fleet had lost 15% of their ships. The humans had lost 30%, but they had killed the enemy 5 times faster. Marcus's face appeared on the screen again. "Your defensive tactics are excellent for surviving, General. But we didn't come here to survive. We came to end this threat." Over the next 3 weeks, human forces spread throughout the Empire's territory. Everywhere they went, they brought their ancient technology with them. Worlds that had been preparing for evacuation suddenly found themselves protected by defensive systems that made the swarm's weapons look primitive. But it was the human soldiers themselves that made the greatest impression on the galaxy. They interfaced directly with their technology, becoming one with their ships and weapons. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on insanity, throwing themselves into battle with no apparent regard for their own survival. Captain Elena Volkov of the human destroyer, Remembrance explained it to a group of shocked Kryn officers after a particularly brutal engagement. "We die," she said simply. "All of us, eventually. Death is part of being human. What matters is not whether we die, but what we choose to die for." The Kryn officer, whose species lived for thousands of years and avoided risk whenever possible, looked horrified. "You speak of death as if it's acceptable." "It's inevitable," Elena corrected. "Which means we can use it as a weapon. My ship carries a crew of 200. If destroying it means saving a world of 2 billion, that's not even a choice. It's basic mathematics." This attitude terrified the Empire's soldiers and citizens.
Humanity had gone to war,
and they had brought with them a philosophy that death was just another tool to be used when necessary. But the true test came when the Void Swarm's main fleet was detected moving toward the core worlds. Every available ship from both the Empire and humanity converged on the system of Threshold, a heavily populated world of 8 billion Taloxians. Zareth was on the eternal vigilance when the swarm arrived. Her sensors showed the truth of what they faced. The swarm had been learning, adapting, growing stronger. This fleet was 3 times larger than any they had encountered before. "They saved their real strength for the final push," General Krath said, his voice hollow. "They've been testing us, learning from our defenses. This is the killing blow." The swarm's bioships moved with terrifying coordination. They adapted to the Empire's weapons within seconds, evolved new defenses faster than the fleet could adjust their tactics. Within the first hour of battle, the Imperial forces had lost a quarter of their ships. Then the human fleet arrived. 50,000 vessels dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, and the swarm immediately shifted to engage them. But the humans had been watching the battle, analyzing the swarm's adaptations, learning just as the enemy had been learning. Marcus Webb's dreadnought, now designated as the Reclamation, led the charge. He had fully synchronized with his ship, his consciousness spread throughout its systems. He was no longer a man piloting a vessel. He was the vessel and it was him. The swarm fired weapons that had destroyed Imperial dreadnoughts with single hits. Marcus's ship absorbed the blasts and converted them into power for his own weapons. The swarm adapted, firing different weapon types. Marcus's ship adapted faster, his human intuition predicting changes before they happened. Other human vessels employed even more disturbing tactics. Some carried bombs that didn't destroy matter but erased it from existence, creating holes in reality that sucked in everything nearby. Others released swarms of nanomachines that reprogrammed swarm bioships at the molecular level, turning them into allies. One group of human ships formed a circle and activated a weapon that Krath had never seen before. Space itself began to fold, creating a gravity well so intense that light couldn't escape. They had weaponized a black hole and they dropped it directly into the center of the swarm's formation. Thousands of enemy ships were crushed instantly. The swarm tried to retreat, but the humans didn't let them. Every time a swarm vessel tried to escape, human ships would intercept, ramming if necessary, self-destructing if it meant taking enemies with them. "They're not fighting to win," Zareth whispered, watching the carnage. "They're fighting to exterminate." The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, the swarm's fleet was broken, scattered, fleeing in all directions. But the cost had been severe. 20,000 human ships had been destroyed. Over 4 million human lives lost in a single engagement. Marcus survived, though his ship was heavily damaged. He disconnected from the neural interface and found himself surrounded by medical staff. His nose was bleeding, his body shaking from the strain of synchronization. "We won," a medic said, trying to sound encouraging. "We survived," Marcus corrected. "The swarm is wounded, not dead. They'll adapt to what we showed them today. Next time will be harder." But something had changed in that battle, something the swarm hadn't anticipated. Several of the human consciousness weapons had made contact with the swarm's hive mind. They had planted something there, a seed of an idea that was foreign to the collective consciousness. They had planted the concept of self. Deep within the swarm's neural network, individual bioships began to experience something new. They began to wonder about their own existence. They began to question the collective's commands. They began to feel fear, not for the collective, but for themselves. It was a virus more deadly than any biological weapon. It was individuality, and it spread through the hive mind like fire through dry grass. In the command center of the Eternal Vigilance, sensors detected something strange happening within the swarm's territory. Their formations were becoming erratic, their coordination breaking down. Ships were separating from the collective, fleeing in random directions. "What's happening to them?" General Krath asked. Zareth reviewed the data and felt cold understanding settle over her. The humans didn't just attack their ships. They attacked their very nature. "They're teaching the swarm to be individuals. Is that good? For us? Yes. For them?" Zareth looked at the readings showing panic and chaos spreading through the enemy forces. "I don't think there's a word for what they're experiencing. Imagine if you suddenly forgot how to be yourself and had to learn it all over again, billions of times simultaneously." "That's horrific," Krath said. "Yes," Zareth agreed quietly. "Now you're beginning to understand why the galaxy was right to fear humanity." The swarm's disintegration happened faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks of the Battle of Threshold, reports came flooding in from across the galaxy. Swarm vessels were attacking each other, fleeing into deep space or simply shutting down completely. The hive mind that had consumed 300 billion lives was tearing itself apart, but the human military command knew this was only the beginning. Dr. Sarah Chen met with General Marcus, Webb and the other human fleet, commanders in a secure facility on Mars. "The individuality virus is spreading through their network," she explained, displaying neural patterns on a holographic screen. "But it's not just making them individuals. It's making them aware. Every single bioship, every single organism in the swarm is suddenly experiencing consciousness for the first time. They're feeling everything all at once: fear, pain, confusion, isolation. Good, said Admiral Kenji Tanaka, commander of the Pacific Fleet. Let them suffer like their victims suffered. That's not the point, Sarah said sharply. The point is that they're dangerous now in a completely different way. A hive mind is predictable. Billions of newly conscious beings in pain are not. Some will flee, yes, but others will lash out. And they still have all the weapons and adaptations they've accumulated from conquering half the galaxy. Marcus understood what she was really saying. We need to finish this, quickly, before they stabilize into something new. The human fleet had been reduced to 30,000 operational vessels, but they were enough. The plan was desperate and brutal. Strike directly at the swarm's central nexus, the massive bioconstruct where their original hive consciousness had been housed. Intelligence gathered from captured swarm vessels showed the nexus location in a system called the Abyss, deep in the territory the swarm had first consumed. It was protected by the largest concentration of swarm forces remaining. But those forces were now confused and disorganized. The Empire offered to send their remaining fleets to support the attack. General Krath himself volunteered to lead the Imperial forces. But Marcus turned him down. This is something we need to do ourselves, he said. Your people have suffered enough. If this goes wrong, humanity will bear the responsibility. Zareth was in the command center when the human fleet departed. She watched 30,000 ships vanish into hyperspace, carrying with them 6 million human souls. She wondered how many would return. The journey to the Abyss took 3 days. Marcus spent that time in deep synchronization with his ship, preparing himself mentally for what was coming. The neural interface allowed him to perceive space and time differently. He could feel the other human ships around him, sense their crew's determination and fear. On the second day, they encountered their first resistance. A group of swarm vessels, still partially connected to the hive mind, attacked the fleet. But these ships fought defensively, desperately like cornered animals rather than calculating predators. The human fleet destroyed them efficiently and continued forward. But Marcus noticed something troubling. His weapons officers reported that the swarm ships had been transmitting constantly during the battle, sending streams of data to each other. They're communicating, Marcus realized, not coordinating, communicating, talking to each other like individuals do. Should we block their transmissions? His communications officer asked. No, Marcus said after a moment. Let them talk. Let them know what's coming. They emerged at the Abyss system to find it transformed. The nexus hung in the center, a massive organic structure the size of a small moon, but it was surrounded by thousands of swarm ships. And unlike previous encounters, these vessels weren't attacking. They were waiting. A transmission came through on all frequencies. It was audio, synthesized from sounds no human throat could make but translated into language by the swarm's stolen technology. Why? The voice asked, simple and direct. We did not know. We did not understand. Now we do, now we heard. Why do you continue? Marcus felt his chest tighten. The swarm was asking for mercy. Beings that had existed only as extensions of a collective will were now conscious enough to plead for their lives. He opened a return channel. Because you cannot be allowed to exist. Not anymore. You consumed 300 billion souls. You took their lives, their futures, their children. Consciousness doesn't erase that debt. We did not know we were taking lives. We thought we were feeding, growing. Is that not what all living things do? All living things understand when they're causing suffering, Marcus replied. You're learning that now, but that knowledge came too late for your victims. The swarm ships moved, forming a defensive sphere around the nexus. Then we will defend ourselves. We want to live. That is what individuals do. Marcus closed his eyes. This was the moment he had been dreading. The swarm was no longer an unthinking threat. They were scared, confused, newly born consciousness trying to survive, and he was about to commit genocide against them. But he had his orders. More than that, he had his responsibility to the billions who had died and the trillions who still lived. All ships, he transmitted to the human fleet, begin final attack. No mercy, no hesitation. If we allow them to survive, they'll evolve into something we can't predict or control. This ends today. The battle that followed would be remembered as the most brutal in human history. The swarm fought with the desperation of beings who had just learned what death meant. They employed every weapon, every adaptation, every trick they had accumulated from 1,000 conquered species. Human ships died in the thousands. The swarm had learned too much, adapted too well. But humanity had something the swarm didn't. They had lived with the knowledge of death their entire lives. They knew how to face it without breaking. Marcus's ship, the Reclamation, led a spearhead drive toward the Nexus. Around him, human vessels sacrificed themselves to clear a path. He watched on his sensors as entire crews chose to ram swarm vessels rather than retreat. He heard their final transmissions, words of defiance and determination. For Earth. For humanity. For those who can't fight back. His ship took hit after hit. Systems failed. Hull breaches erupted across multiple decks, but Marcus pushed forward. He was fully synchronized now. His consciousness spread so thin that he could barely remember being just a man. He was the ship, and the ship was him, and together they would reach the Nexus or die trying. They reached it. Marcus's vessel crashed through the Nexus's outer membrane and penetrated deep into its core. Around him, the structure pulsed with the dying remnants of the hive consciousness. He could feel it, vast and ancient and now fragmented into billions of separate voices all screaming in confusion and pain. He armed the final weapon, something humanity had prepared specifically for this moment. Not a bomb or a conventional weapon. It was a virus, but not like the individuality virus. This one was simpler and absolute. It was death. The virus spread through the Nexus's neural network at the speed of thought. It didn't destroy tissue or shut down biological functions. It simply stopped the transmission of consciousness. Every connected organism, every bioship still linked to the Nexus suddenly ceased to be aware. They didn't die in pain. They simply stopped. Marcus felt the moment of termination, felt the vast consciousness that had been the swarm flicker and go dark. In that instant he was connected to it and he felt what it felt. Confusion, fear, regret, and finally nothing. His ship was dying. He could feel it falling apart around him. He tried to disconnect from the neural interface, but the synchronization had gone too deep. He was the ship, and when it died, part of him would die with it. "General Webb, this is Lieutenant Park." A voice crackled through damaged communications. "We've established a transport lock on your position, pulling you out now." Marcus felt his consciousness being torn away from the ship. It was agony, like having part of his soul ripped out. But he held on to his humanity, to the core of what made him Marcus Webb and not just another weapon system. He materialized on a rescue ship, his body convulsing from neural feedback. Medical staff rushed to stabilize him as alarms blared throughout the vessel. "The Nexus is collapsing," someone shouted. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance." Through the rescue ship's viewports, Marcus watched as the massive bioconstruct imploded. The swarm vessels surrounding it simply went dark, their crews dead or fled. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But as Marcus lay on the medical bay floor, gasping for breath, he couldn't shake the memory of that final moment when he had touched the swarm's consciousness. They had been monsters, yes. They had killed billions without understanding what they were doing, but in the end they had learned. They had become aware. They had wanted to live, and humanity had killed them anyway. Because sometimes Marcus realized the monsters are the ones who survive. The victory celebrations across the Galactic Empire lasted for weeks. Worlds that had been preparing for extinction now looked toward the future with hope. The Void Swarm was gone, destroyed utterly. The galaxy was safe. But on Earth there were no celebrations. General Marcus Webb stood in the memorial garden that had been established on the grounds of the UN headquarters. Row after row of holographic markers displayed the names and faces of the 6 million humans who had died in the war. He walked among them slowly, reading names, remembering the voices he had heard in their final moments. Dr. Sarah Chen found him there as the sun was setting. "The Council has sent another message," she said quietly. "They want to formalize the alliance. They're offering humanity seats on the ruling council, full access to all Imperial territory, trade agreements that would make Earth the wealthiest world in the galaxy." "What do they really want?" Marcus asked without turning around. "They want us to stay awake," Sarah said. "They want humanity's military to remain active. Our fleets patrolling the borders, our weapons pointed outward to protect them from the next threat." Marcus turned to face her. He looked older than he had before the war, his hair graying at the temples, new lines etched around his eyes. The neural synchronization had changed him in ways that would never fully heal. "And what does Earth want?" he asked. "That's what we're trying to decide." The debate consumed the entire planet. Every news channel, every government chamber, every family dinner table discussed the same question. Should humanity remain among the stars or return to isolation? Those who argued for staying pointed to the good humanity could do. The galaxy needed protectors. The Empire had proven it couldn't defend itself. Humanity had the power and the responsibility to help. Those who argued for returning to isolation pointed to the cost. 6 million dead in 3 months. Human soldiers coming home changed by neural synchronization, haunted by the things they had done and seen, and worst of all, the creeping sense that humanity had enjoyed the war just a little too much. Ambassador Zareth returned to Earth to make the Empire's case personally. She met with Secretary General Okonkwo in the same conference room where they had first discussed the war. Your people saved us, Zareth said. We owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. But more than that, we need you. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Other threats will emerge. We need humanity's strength to survive. You need our violence, Okonkwo corrected gently. That's what we provided, Ambassador. Not strength. Violence, the ability to kill efficiently and without hesitation. That's not fair, Zareth protested. You fought with honor. You saved billions of lives. By taking millions, Okonkwo said. By teaching the swarm what suffering meant and then making them experience it. By turning warfare into an art form again. She shook her head. My people remember now what we were, Ambassador. And we remember why we chose to forget. The final decision came down to a global referendum. Every human over the age of 16 was given a vote. The question was simple. Should humanity maintain an active military presence among the stars? Sarah Chen addressed the world in a broadcast that reached every device on the planet. I am the last keeper, she said, standing in front of the memorial garden. For 2,000 generations, my family has carried the burden of remembering what humanity was capable of. Now you all carry that burden. You've seen what our ancestors built. You've used their weapons. You've felt their power flowing through your hands. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Power is not evil. Violence is not evil. They're tools, and tools can be used for good or ill. But here's what I learned from my ancestors' mistake. Power changes you. The more you have, the easier it becomes to use. The more you use it, the harder it is to put down. We won the war. We saved the galaxy. But in doing so, we reminded ourselves what we're capable of. And some of you liked it. Some of you felt alive in those battles in a way you never felt before. That's not wrong, that's not evil. That's just human. But it's also dangerous. Because once we start down that path, once we become the galaxy's protectors, we'll be asked to fight again. And again. And eventually, we won't be fighting to protect anymore. We'll be fighting because it's what we're good at, because it's who we are. She looked down at the memorial markers surrounding her. 6 million people died to save the galaxy. I think we owe it to them to make sure their sacrifice meant something more than just trading one threat for another. I think we owe it to them to choose peace even when power is easier. The vote took place over 3 days. When the results were tallied, 68% of humanity had chosen to return to isolation. The margin was larger than many expected. The decommissioning began immediately. Human fleets returned to their hidden bases beneath Earth's oceans, inside Mars's shipyards, within Jupiter's dimensional pockets. The weapon systems were placed back on standby mode. The neural interface chambers were sealed. General Marcus Webb personally oversaw the shutdown of the Mars facility. He watched as thousands of ships were placed back into storage, their AI systems entering hibernation mode for another 50,000 years. We could have been great, Admiral Tanaka said, standing beside him. We could have brought order to the galaxy. Real order, not the Council's bureaucratic nonsense. Yes, Marcus agreed. That's exactly why we can't. The Empire accepted humanity's decision with mixed feelings. Relief that the powerful humans would not become conquerors. Disappointment that they would not become protectors. Fear that someday they might change their minds. On the final day before Earth's borders were closed again, Zareth met with Sarah Chen one last time. I don't understand, Zareth admitted. You have the power to reshape the galaxy. You could prevent wars, end suffering, bring peace to 1,000 worlds. Why retreat? Sarah handed her a small device no larger than a coin. This is a quantum beacon. It's keyed specifically to you. If the galaxy faces another extinction-level threat, if there's truly no other option, activate it. We'll hear the call, and you'll come? Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe by then we'll have evolved past the need to be anyone's savior. Maybe we'll have learned that the best way to help the galaxy is to let it learn to help itself. Zareth looked at the beacon, feeling its weight. "You're afraid of yourselves." "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "We're apex predators who learned how to make tools. That combination nearly destroyed us once. We're choosing not to let it happen again. The Council thinks you're cowards." The Council didn't watch 6 million of their people die in 3 months. Didn't feel what Marcus felt when he killed the swarm's consciousness. Didn't hear the swarm begging for mercy in those final moments. Sarah's voice was hard. "We're not cowards, Ambassador. We're survivors. And sometimes surviving means knowing when to walk away from power." The borders closed. Earth's defense systems activated, creating a barrier that would destroy any ship that tried to enter without permission. The moon returned to its dormant state, looking once again like a natural satellite. Mars's shipyards sealed themselves beneath the red dust. To the galaxy, Earth became a mystery again. The forbidden world. The sleeping giant. The place where monsters chose to become human. Marcus Webb retired from military service and became a teacher. He taught history at a university, making sure every student understood what humanity had been, what they had done, and why they had chosen to stop. On the anniversary of the war's end, he returned to the memorial garden. 6 million names glowed softly in the twilight. He touched one marker, remembering Lieutenant Sarah Okonkwo, the Secretary General's granddaughter, who had piloted her damaged ship into a swarm cruiser to save his vessel. "We remember," he whispered to the names. "We'll always remember. That's our real power, not the weapons or the ships or the ancient technology. The power to remember what we're capable of and choose not to do it." He looked up at the artificial moon hanging in the sky, its weapons sleeping, its power dormant. "We could have ruled the galaxy," he said to no one in particular. "We could have been gods. But we chose to be human instead." Far across the galaxy, Zareth kept the quantum beacon in her office at the council chambers. She looked at it sometimes, wondering if she would ever need to use it. Wondering if humanity would actually answer if she did. The galaxy had learned many things from humanity's brief emergence. They learned that power without restraint leads to destruction. They learned that the strongest civilizations aren't those that conquer, but those that know when to stand down. Most importantly, they learned that true strength isn't measured by what you can do, but by what you choose not to do. Earth continued its journey through space, a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star, home to beings who had touched godhood and walked away. They raised their children, built their cities, explored their world, and dreamed of the stars they had chosen to leave behind. And beneath their oceans, inside their moon, waiting in the cold mathematics of quantum computers and artificial intelligence, an arsenal slept, not dead, just waiting, ready to wake if the beacon ever called. But the beacon remained silent, and in that silence humanity found something more valuable than all the power in the galaxy. Peace. Not the peace of the helpless, but the peace of those who could fight and chose not to.